Welcome to the Mike and Doug Show. I'm Doug. Hi, Mike.
Hey, Doug,
We're gonna
do
talk.
it.
We're gonna talk about something that gets you all riled up. Your hat may fall off your head. We're going to talk about judicial anarchy. Now, you personally have been subjected to torturous judicial anarchy, and so I think you
Yep.
probably have suffered as much as anybody I know in those realms. Matter of fact, didn't you spend like mega millions of dollars trying to
Well, I
defend yourself in a
haven't
court?
talked about that, but it was about $12 million.
About $12 million defending yourself in court. They found that 11, what was it, 11 out of 11 or 11 out of 12 things you were right. But in the
11 out of
end,
11 claims
oh,
were
in the end, there was a judicial step that you didn't know about that they did that just threw the whole thing out, though they had already found you to be in the right. That's what we're in today. And today I'm really upset because I was welcomed this morning by the word that President Trump had called martial law. You see how they take that and they'll put it as a headline? Trump did not call martial law. He called out 2,000 National Guards for the rioting, 50% of which were illegal alien invaders in LA, where there is lawlessness to the point that the governor, Gavin Newsom, and the mayor of LA, Karen Bass, are being threatened that if they interfere with the 2,000 National Guard, the Marines, and possibly the Army that have been called out, that they will be arrested. Now, let's remember, they fomented this dissent. They allowed it by creating a unconstitutional sanctuary city, creating an unconstitutional sanctuary state, giving illegal alien invaders full medical benefits, IRS numbers, Social Security numbers, and all kinds of illegal lawyer help. For instance, the payroll pipeline of Joe Biden, which brought in unvetted people, paid them, flew them in, gave them places to live, gave them $10,000 on a credit card, a car, a house, paid for everything, more than our soldiers who have been beaten down in war, our veterans on the street, aren't given any consideration. So I don't know what's going on in this world and what's happening in LA. All I can say is I can tell you why it's happening, but I don't know quite how it could be that humans could devolve so far as to turn into the animals that we're seeing in these so far supposedly peaceful George Soros color revolution 5051. You know, about 50501, 50 protests in 50 states, one movement. Go to their site. If that is not a George Soros color revolution site, I will kiss your foot. And down at the bottom, it doesn't ask for any donations. And yet they've already had, they claim, 70 demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations, they say. Well, we haven't heard of any of them. Isn't that interesting? And so the hype in this, the paranoia, the fear, the empowerment for illegals, half of the people that surrounded the ICE agency in Los Angeles, who were threatening the ICE agents who had just arrested 44 people, illegals who they had warrants on. The people we're arresting now and sending out, there are warrants for their arrest. They had their day in court. And first off, they don't deserve a day in court because an illegal alien invading this country who is a felon does not have standing in a court. And they certainly don't get free representation. So all of this is what you could call the liberals. They call it democracy. Every time this happens, they say it's for them when they go out and riot, whether it's Black Lives Matter, Antifa, or this organized resistance to Trump. By the way, the National Defense Authorization Act says that resistance to the presidential administration makes you a terrorist called a domestic war actor. So they're all that's why Biden was throwing that term around and labeling people so that he could use the FBI, CIA, and the military to go after his enemies, because he declared them to be what he called domestic radicals, where there's no bigger radicals than the followers of what's his name, Obama's teacher, Alinsky.
Saul Alinsky.
Okay, rules for radicals. Well, that's what they're doing here. And now we have judges who have ruled that there are sanctuary states, sanctuary cities, and that illegals have rights. They told President Trump he didn't have standing in the Supreme Court for an illegal election, but they give standing to an illegal who they say signed a document, has been deported, and is not represented before the judge in one of the 677 district courts that are overruling our president, and in fact are really nothing more than the arm of the Congress. Those are all made up courts. None of them need to exist. And Judge Boasberg, because he's the head of the FISA court, why didn't he go to jail for his crimes, which we already know what they are? And he's admitted he's the number one representative of the illegal invasion into America. So if Trump doesn't call the Insurrection Act after tomorrow or today's the 8th, is the day that there's supposed to be 50 protests in 50 cities, one movement. And you can go online and sign up for this. I didn't sign up, by the way. But you can also then go online and read Thomson Reuters. Reuters report on it, which is all lies. And if you look at the pictures, you can see lies. What's that, Mike?
You mean when you say Thomson Reuters, you saying Pilgrim Society and Rothschilds?
Yeah, we forgot to mention that the Rothschilds are the Reuters Society. They were in the same building, like in the office next to them when the first Bank of England opened. It was their secret organization for passing secret information so that they could corner markets and control wars. And now we little people have my Skiff Messenger Vault, and we can now send messages very secretively, very privately, even if we don't have secrets to keep. And this is the deal. All the revolutions created by George Soros were done on social media. Go on social media and try to follow this. They got real clever. Doesn't say who they're affiliated with, doesn't ask for money. There's no connections. And supposedly this is just one guy on the internet who started this, and supposedly has had 1,700 protests across the country in different cities. And most of these are taking place in the capitals of each of the states. They had one in Michigan. Yeah, they had one in Michigan. About 25 people showed up. You know who those people were? Those are the people that Trump fired for not doing anything in their federal job, or they were people receiving money from non-government organizations paid by George Soros and other fake, supposedly democratic groups. If they say they're democratic and they're Democrats, demon rats, they can't be a 501c3. So we're living in an age of oxymorons, topsy-turvy, everything's upside down, inside out, and backwards. And so if you're not ready for that, you may have awakened this morning and said, oh my God, we're under martial law. Trump is taking over. That's what they're telling everybody, but that ain't true. What's happened is, thank heavens, we finally have a president who called the National Guard out on these NGO instigated, paid for supposed protests that always turn violent. And by the way, the reason they turn violent is because they cornered the ICE agents in the parking, underground parking in their building, and they were going to kill them. And they were throwing explosive bombs at them, and they did a lot of damage. So they arrested 45 people. In my opinion, they should have arrested. It's going to come to the age when you have to carry your citizenship papers with you, because otherwise we have been overrun, folks.
Yeah, we've got to have a backbone, and we've got to expect the current administration to protect us, which means if it means going to arms, we've got to go to arms to protect our country. And that was the mentality in the revolution as well. They were pretty ruthless with their trials for treason. And we are not ruthless with our trial. When's there been a trial for treason? And yet we see these thousands and tens of thousands of people committing treason every day. And I think that the Saul Alinsky tactic is to just overrun us so that we will get numb to what they're doing. And I think that we need our government to put its foot down. It's time.
Boy,
And
that's for sure.
with these judges, you're right. I took a case to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court wouldn't protect us. And what I discovered there is the Supreme Court and the lower courts had no interest in protecting my property rights, no interest in protecting my intellectual property. They had interest in making sure that social networking was implemented throughout the government's agencies and in Silicon Valley and all of commerce in order to develop this universal way of spying on everyone in America. And that's what they were about. We've discovered that. And what we've noticed, and here we talk about judges, but I think we need to broaden that lens a bit and talk about attorneys. These attorneys are pledged and are duty bound to protect us citizens according to the Constitution. That's not happening. And attorneys that are supposedly the good guys out there, if they are silent in not protecting us, then they are just as culpable. And so consequently, I think that we've got a huge judicial crisis. we've empowered people to use the law as a hammer and a sledgehammer rather than a shield of protecting truth. And so consequently, we're upside down as a country. And what happens when countries get upside down and their institutions fail? A couple of things: either they collapse or we stand up and protect it.
Civil War. Well, in the American Revolution, we were fighting the traitors who were inside of us, who were Brits, who were loyalists, right?
Right.
In the Civil War, we were fighting the traitors who were the Southerners in the North and the Northerners in the South and the British and the French, and everybody else was in on it. And in the end, it was only because the French intervened that we actually won, supposedly, the American Revolution. But the Treaty of Paris, wasn't it? It had components in it that made it so that the war's not over.
Right. The property was not seized. The British property was not seized.
There's still property that they own that we didn't pay for. So they say they still own the country. So it goes on in today's modern age. Every war, it was a British false flag intelligence information that got us involved in it. Just look closely. And then right now, what happens? Well, they brought their British aristocracy system into what we call the judicial system by creating congressional districts that never, ever needed to be created. None of them. And then the special courts in D.C. that are federal courts. Okay, an immigration court, a court for FISA, that should have been closed down. Those are the kind of courts they have there. A court for commerce. That's where all the corruption goes on. The big corruption goes on in those federal courts. They all need to be closed down. There's only one court the Constitution provides for, the Supreme Court. And it is basically a political machine of appointing people who act like they are one extreme or the other, and that's how they get on. Well, if they're one extreme or the other, they're biased. They should never have been allowed on if they were biased, period.
Yep.
And all these lower courts, 677 of them, those are the appellate courts, the upper courts, and the lower courts. Those were usually for settling disputes between states.
Yes.
So why do we need 677 of them? We need none of them, actually, because we have the recourse to federal courts. Now, how does that work in England? The Temple Bar and all the bars and all the promising, it doesn't matter. If you're an aristocrat, you go to a special court and you win every time. And if you're a monarch, you go to your own court, the King's Court, the Queen's Court, they call it. They always win. You are not allowed to look into the monarch's business, so you can't look into their finances. That's why you can't look at the Bank of England's finances, because they say they keep money there, though we know they keep money at other places. The point is that their system is foolproof, and the aristocrats, they never lost in the courts. You want to know why? Because the highest lord of a district in an area was the judge. Oh, nothing biased about that.
That's why the Pilgrims said we've got to be imperial, because we got to hide behind this monarchy. It's a good deal.
When you're appointed for life, What can you do wrong?
Yeah, and their strategy was to take over the U.S. Supreme Court by making sure our judges were selected that were pro-British. And so when you talk about these different inns of, what we're talking about is the Inns of Court in England that has 4 bars in it. And wouldn't you know it, our courts and lawyers who practice federally are members of Inns of Court in the US, and our Inns of Court collaborate with the Inns of Court in England to take their instructions. What is really hilarious is when laws appear with the British spelling on certain words that they don't always get past the censor, and sometimes they do. And so what we're seeing is a concerted effort to organize our courts so that as the annexation of America is accomplished, we will just wrap right into the British legal system. And here we see John Roberts going over to, we see all of our justices going over to Europe and being wined and dined by the Rothschilds. There are pictures of Jacob Rothschild being courting our various current justices, Ketanji Jackson, Amy Coney Barrett, the two guys, the two recent guys. So they've all been wined and dined by the British elite, and know who's calling the shots. And here we watch Roberts now, who is a Knight of Malta English Priory. So he's got a knightship from that points back to the British Crown and King Charles. We've got him now resisting Trump in various ways that are exposing him for the British loyalist that he is. And so, do I have anything against the British? No, I don't. I lived over there for 6 years. I have many friends over there, and they're wonderful people. But what we see in this aristocratic group associated with the Pilgrim Society is we see a long strategy of 120 years to annex America. And that was something that a very scrappy American journalist back in about 1907 started publicizing, and he actually called them the Benedict Arnold Society. And later on, after she moved back to the States, she started advising Congress. So our leaders and thought leaders have known about this conspiracy, and it is a conspiracy to annex America back into the British Empire, because Cecil Rhodes told his disciples that if we don't have America under our wing, we cannot rule the world through this new world order. Henry Kissinger knew this new world order plan well. He kept talking about it. So did George H.W. Bush Sr., talked about it. They're all members, as was Lyndon Johnson, as was Alexander Haig, Caspar Weinberger, now Bill Gates. These guys are all pawns in this game that the British play much better than we do in America. And if we don't take back our sovereignty right now in exposing these people, we will lose our republic. I am pretty sure that could happen. It has a high statistical probability of happening, since our current government is not stepping up to protect our rights, as you have described in this recent action with the, I guess it's the Army in California, the National Guard. We've got to do that all over the country.
I believe it will happen today, that any of those protests that go violent will meet the National Guard. It takes 24 hours to get them there, but they've all been called up. They're already the ones that are in the local areas where these are happening have been warned. And so they're not going to be any more Portland, Oregons. There's not going to be any more burning cities where everyone says on the news that it's a peaceful protest. That's just not going to happen anymore. Now, the overthrow of America was not just for these anarchist justices who now think they're God. They think that they're above everyone who comes into their court, and then they call it their court. It ain't their court. It's the people's court. And they're idiots. Look at these people. They are going against the Constitution. If they were to take a new vow, that they will uphold the Constitution and that all their decisions will be reviewed by a court of citizens who determine whether their actions are unconstitutional or not. And if they are, they will meet the promises of treason, which is death. That's how serious it should be, because these court decisions of anarchy against the president cause deaths. We don't know how many millions of people have died from fentanyl. We don't know how many people have died before they even got to the border, and the coyotes and the cartels got them across the border. And then when they got here, how come so many of them disappear? We should have 70 or 80 million invaders at this point. We know we have 22 million of them that are being paid, that are on Social Security and paying IRS and getting refunds. But then we have millions who just stopped sending their remittances back to their country because they're illegal and they don't have IRS clearance. So we have so many, we don't know what to do with it. So if we wish to either face it now, when it's not as organized as it will be in the future, and we can call it a civil war, I call it civil law action. This is nothing more than enforcing the laws that we have. And when a judge rules against laws that we have and rules against the Constitution, they need not to be put into jail. They need to meet the serious consequences of the fact that people die from those decisions.
You cannot hardly sue a judge for fraud, even when you've got proof of it. I know some people who have tried, and it goes nowhere. And if it gets past the first court of appeal, and the second one, usually it's thrown out, because these judges protect each other, because they use the logic here, but by the grace of God go I. So they protect their own, and it's a private guild associated with royalty.
Look what they did with Trump with all the lawsuits. I think I've tried to keep track. Aren't all of them reversed, except the one he paid to that prostitute who came forward when David Brock offered $275,000 for anyone who would lie and say that Trump had raped them, and he did it on air on national television.
Well, you know, the
and then she wins a case in a court with that.
Yeah. Well, you can indict a ham sandwich if you intend to.
Now,
and that's the problem with our legal system. Our lawyers are so corrupt morally that they use the excuse that everybody is deserving of a day in court, and they have agreed that they will protect guilty people. And so that is their opening to give them an excuse to lie whenever possible to protect guilty people. And they do.
The lawyer's brief at the beginning of the case is almost all lies, and they're allowed to do that.
Right.
They get to lie, and then they get to say, client privilege, attorney privilege, client privilege, because why? They know they're lying, but
Right.
that allows them to lie. It's like, what? We created a whole criminal cabal, a syndicate, to basically make sure that only the elite, because we're in a caste system, whether we know it or not. I have no standing. I don't know all the laws. I've gone before the courts and I lost. Even the only reason I did anything good, because the judge would be nice and say, I can't tell you this, but you should try this. And then I'd do it. Okay. You can't defend yourself in the court. And even so, you have to have an illegal, unlawful, despicable person. I think I went through like 18 lawyers before I found one who had any morality in his voice, because I could tell by hearing their voice. No morality whatsoever. Now, they came in with the justice system, and that is an add-on. Remember that, folks. That's a British add-on to our system. We don't need any of those circuit courts.
You mean the district court system?
Yeah, the federal district courts, throw it out.
Well, that whole federal system, you're right, is so far, our whole point was states' rights. And for us being close enough to those that govern to be able to hold them accountable. So this whole federal system that puts these these people out on pedestals so far away that we never visit them, they don't know us, makes it inaccessible to citizens. But who is it accessible to? It's accessible to the big box lawyer firms and their lawyers, who then schmooze with the judges in the Inns of Court, and therefore rig the whole system so that anytime one of us out as a civilian want to go into the system, we have to cut a deal with some law firm who would do our deal on contingency in order to even have enough time and energy to prosecute the case. So we're screwed before we start. And it's so far away from us. We ought to be able to get in the car and drive to our court, and that's it. That's the definitive word. And as you're saying, that would have been, it was, until this district court system was built as another layer, federal layer. That is one. I remember writing after we had the split verdict with Facebook in the trial. I remember writing the deans of the law schools around the legal missteps that Facebook had. And of the several hundred that I wrote, how many answers do you think I got? That's effectively right. There was one guy whose email system acknowledged that I had sent it. That was it. And I said, there's something wrong here with this legals. These law schools generate these people who then maybe start out with some intention to do the right thing, but they get schmoozed and worked and discriminated against if they do the wrong thing, and only the ones that are immoral move forward, in my observation.
Oh, I think that's the test. If you have a heart, if you have morality, you can't go up the ladder of success that is created by the British Pilgrims Society's Jesuit-modeled Venetian Doge Italian banker model. I mean, let's remember, this stuff has been going on for thousands of years. It's really hard to fight this
Right. They're very good at
demon
it.
bureaucracy. And so, for instance, what did Trump do when he came to power? This time he said, no more administrative judges and no more administrative rulings, that you act like it's a law and people have to obey it.
Right.
Who made that law? I'm always saying, who made that law? There was no law. There was no law. And then we have laws.
They twisted a concept that Congress started using in passing laws in order to not make it too detailed in the writing of the law itself. They started adding a provision that said the policy making out of this law will be developed by some court or agency. And so that's the way they then devolved into these administrative courts, which act like courts. They look like courts. They wear robes, and yet they're not accountable to anybody except Congress. But how often can you take a judge and impeach them before Congress? I mean, it's stupid. I mean, I haven't seen any politician ready to do it.
The administrative courts are demon spawns from the federal courts that are demons, and those laws come from our Congress, and they don't need to exist. And just because that's why Trump got rid of the administrative law courts, nobody batted an eye, because they don't actually have any real standing.
But they didn't get rid of the patent administrative courts.
No.
So the government is not following the order.
Well, that's what I was going to say next, is that the anarchist judiciary system is just one branch. There's another branch, and that is the political branch, and that is controlled by the SES, which is put into place by Jimmy Carter because he was manipulated by Lord Mark Malloch Brown to not only put all of our voting machines into the control of the British Pilgrims Society through the software called Optech, which is still to this day the only software used to count our votes, folks, and it's all corrupt. That's the SES, 10,000 people who can't be fired, who are all political appointees, who don't even know their job. Well, in some cases they rise up from the civil service, but they're above civil service. They get paid more, they have special benefits, and they have taken over the 56, which there are actually many more, but 56 major federal agencies, okay? And then there is the mercantile branch, which of course, the Babylonian Radhanite mercantile Sogdian Yiddish-speaking bankster warlords certainly made sure that British Serco got every major contract, usually no bid contracts. All the largest contracts go to British companies. They control our uranium. They control our Navy. They control our military. They control our federal
Admiral.
aviation. They control our weather. They do the weather manipulation. So you have the British literally using us as the proxy for the evil that they don't get blamed for. And
Right.
then no one ever blames the British. I don't understand how the blinders that they have put on the eyes of historians, and because you pointed out, the Empire Press Union or basically became what we call today Thomson Reuters or the AP. It is the mainstream media tells their lies, doesn't allow anything ever to be said bad about them as philanthropists and world leaders and leaders of the climate change movement and all the kind of stuff.
Oh, I have to say something.
Please do.
I do have to say something, and I have to just jump in here. I'm listening in the other room. This is the most brilliant conversation I have ever heard. So I want you to go as long as you can, because you guys are really telling the big story. And I had this feeling that if we can get this story out to everyone, then the devil, Satan, can never go further than where we are right now.
Good point.
Good. Amen to that.
Okay.
So keep
Well,
going.
Okay, Douglas, you were mentioning propaganda and the Pilgrim Society, but maybe something more recent would help. When most of us grew up, we were handed this book called The Hidden Persuaders when we were in junior high and high school, and it was talking about the power of Madison Avenue to brainwash people. And what most of us didn't know then, that whole that approach came out of the Tavistock Institute and the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Europe, which were all pilgrims. And one of the key proponents was Edward Bernays, who was, I think, the nephew of Sigmund Freud. And so what we see here is another example of how our thinking was attacked at the same time as our bank accounts were attacked. And so we have been so dumbed down as a public not to realize that they're the same people. We see all these as isolated pieces and parts, and we don't understand the big picture. But when we understand that the big picture was to annex America, to put America back in the British Empire, then these issues start making sense. Bernays so wiped our minds of anything but materialism that we've been taught not to think critically. And so therefore, the Empire Press Union, through Reuters, through Madison Avenue, through Tavistock Institute, through British Fleet Street, which is the main street in the city of London for newspapers and propaganda, they've all had this common theme that really came out of the Empire Press Union. And one of the, if you look at the book, we've put the book online, you can read it. Marconi was there at that conference, and they were discussing how they were going to use telegraphy. Essentially, at that time, it's interesting looking back at the newspapers, it looked like texting because they could send these certain messages by telegraphy from the United States to Britain or wherever they were sending in seconds at that point. And this was back at the turn of the last century. So ours is even faster, but they had it fast enough to do all this propaganda through telegraphy and wireless telegraphy at the time. And so they learned that the best type of propaganda was the drip approach. Just keep repeating your story. Now, to do that, they had to have people that were conceiving these strategies. And that's the central role of the Pilgrim Society. Not that they did it all, but they sent the orders out so that today we see horrible examples of that in these Chiron stories where you'll see 500 different news outlets reading exactly the same news feed to their people in their local area. And so we've got to realize we've got to wake up, because if we don't start thinking critically, these people will achieve their goal. They think they've gotten a long way toward their goal, but I don't think they think they're there yet. But the idea that we're winning, I don't think is a foregone conclusion yet.
Yeah, no, it's a battle, and it's a pitched battle, and humanity is in the crosshairs because, as you hear from all of the high tech people who have their money invested in AI, that's the genocide of humans. It is the end of humanity. So, is that really true? Well, let's look at just what you mentioned. Avid ISIS management. ISIS is a name for the Thames River. Produces our news. And I know because when I was in the NSA, I used to take the news coming from Britain that had been filtered through Britain, and then I filtered it, and then it went to the American public. And the Brits knew at that time, with wireless propagation, that it was a weapon. And they were going to use it as a weapon. So they created the most sophisticated propaganda since Jimmy Carter, again, with Lord Mark Malloch Brown's help, allowed silent subliminal programming to go onto all television advertisements, and anything that the government did had that in it to make you believe it. You were hypnotized. You were simply hypnotized, like we're hypnotized by looking at the results of a vote. That was determined before the vote was taken. It was determined before the candidates were chosen, folks. The exact numbers, the exact margin between them. All right? So it goes, for instance, John Carney in Canada. What is it? They did a recount and found it was a 1 vote difference between him and the other candidate. Where did he come from? He's a Brit. He didn't even live in Canada. He's a jerk. He's a globalist. No one would want him to be in control of their government. And yet the most psychopathic, megalomaniacal people now run countries. I don't know. It's almost like some kind of game show. Can your leader be crazier than ours? But when it comes down to it, the British have this all gamed out. It's all planned. And so
corporations.
Yeah, and when the Rothschilds pharmaceutical company that produced hoof and mouth disease, mad cow disease, which went into a human form, they moved it to China, and then that's when we get to see all these different illnesses, Asian flu, all these, and the current ones, which I'm not going to mention. All those happen right there. Why? Because there's a British P4 lab in Wuhan, folks. Do you think the Chinese did that to themselves? Why do you think Anthony Fauci shipped it over there so that it wouldn't be here? First off, it's illegal here. Second off, if there's a leak or if there's a problem, it's other people. That's the way they think. When we're talking about Cecil Rhodes, we're talking about a white supremacist, imperialist pig. And when we're talking about the leaders of Britain, you're talking about people like Winston Churchill, who was a liar. He was a propagandist. He was a yellow journalist in the Boer War who lied and said that he was captured and then escaped and that all things are good for the British. No, nothing could be further than the truth. And now we're looking at the repercussions of what happened with South Africa.
I will mention Churchill's nephew was Charles F.G. Masterman, who was the founder of the Bureau of Propaganda for the British government, called sometimes Wellington House. And so Churchill was schooled in his family on propaganda. He knew how to do it. And he had, as you mentioned, his early career was supposedly covering the Boer War, but all he was doing was sending propaganda narratives back.
The H.G. Wells, the writers of all these propaganda.
Arthur Conan Doyle.
Look at the Durants, who they wrote their history of the world, and it said that the British were always nice. These were paid for by lords, British lords. Okay, right. They provided their house, their food, and all isms that you know of, folks, whether it be Fabianism or Trotskyism or Bolshevism or fascism, all began in London. They were incubated there. They were sent to disturb a country so it would go into what I call, which is happening right in LA today, Marxist chaos. We just want everything to go chaos under the auspices that we're going to say we're going to have a redistribution of wealth because this poor caste this poor lower group of people wants to rebel and have a revolution against the aristocrats. This is as stupid as Bernie Sanders' revolution party, who now has chosen AOC to be the leader of the Democrat Party. That's how insane we have gone. And what's going on in LA, that you have those two unbelievable people, Newsom and the mayor of LA, saying what they say. They should go to jail for what they say. They are promoting death. They are killing people. When the anarchist judges tell you these things, what I see is the British movie where you have the the Brit who isn't really male or female, who has no heart, no sensitivity, at a certain point in day starts their alcohol abuse, who they have to have refined alcohol, 10 different types, before and after dinner, before and after the dessert, until every single night they end up drunk in bed. Why? So they don't have to look at their conscience.
Yeah, that's half of their movies, where there's just standing around with a glass of wine all day, all during their movie.
Heartless people. When you look at even the histories that they allow them to put out on for us to look at, or you see truth history by reading it from your site or reading it from the book Truth History, The Truth Has Set You Free. Folks, you can't talk about anything more despicable than our leaders in the Western world in modern history. There is no limit. And now we're seeing that basically when you say Democrat, you say mob rule, you say violence. You say, I go on the street and we call it peaceful protests as we burn the city down. Portland is still burning. I just talked to a friend. Portland is not redeemed yet.
Really?
They still rule half the city. Those same people who receive government funds to stay there. Let's remember, they've gone and talked to those people. They're paid to stay there,
Right.
paid to make look like the protest it's actually means something. And remember, Gavin Newsom allows millions, and that would be Pelosi also, that would be all of the California people, allow millions. Who? Feinstein, who actually owns Avid, ISIS management. At one point she owned it. I don't know if she still does. So she sold out American mainstream media to the Brits. Why would you trust her? Look at what she did in Napa Valley. Look at what Nancy Pelosi did in Napa Valley. We're talking about people who allow in millions and millions and millions. They don't allow. They beg them through allurement to come get their free check, their free food, their free housing, their free medical. Okay. In America, even if you pay your insurance, you don't get free medical. If you're a citizen, you have to pay copays. But these people get it completely free. Not only that, they get free lawyers. When they get arrested after killing someone, they get released many times. And then their politicians are alluring them to America. But look, folks, I want to point something out to you. California has had, since I've been keeping track, over 5 million homeless people come up missing because they wait until the tent encampments get so big that then they're filthy with sewage and typhus and cholera and you name it, every type of disease you can know, which is brought across the border because they're not checked medically, they're not vetted. And these are in fact invaders sent to us from their own prisons who are bringing with us not only fentanyl and poison, but they rape. I have seen reports that say there's no such thing as a girl comes across the southern border who hasn't been raped multiple times. And the Pope Francis supported this. We have politicians who support this. We have politicians who fly down and use our tax dollars to demand that people are released from prison. And they brought them back. And what did they charge them, that very person, with? Human trafficking. Children especially was his specialty. Many, they don't know how many. The guy that they say needs to have his day in court and not go to an El Salvador prison. No, we are in the point of sheer chaos. And if we do not start using the rules we have for recall, even though they recalled Gavin Newsom and the fake voting machine said he wasn't really kicked out, or Karen Bass, why isn't she recalled right now? Why don't they recall these people who demand an open border, which kills people? And then why do they say that they don't want anyone bringing order to it? This is the collapse of America from the inside out, the prediction of all of the isms. All of the isms say that capitalism in America, which they call democracy, which it is not, it is a constitutional republic. So a capitalistic free market, which there's no free market, and capitalism isn't true in America, and it's a constitutional republic, but they all call it a democracy because the one democracy, it was in Athens. That's the loudest group of people win the vote. Whoever yells the loudest, that's what democracy is. That's what we have in the streets of America. It is disgusting. It is illegal. And if we do not right now get rid of the tens of millions of illegal aliens who are criminals, they know they're criminals, and they're raising their children in homes to teach them to be criminals. If we don't get rid of them, we will have a civil war in America.
Yeah, I think we've got to call on all people. If they have morality, they've got to stand up. It's not about expecting somebody else to do the job. We've all got to stand up and demand that our government do what it was designed to do, and we can't keep waiting. And I think that hopefully there are some good people that will allow this to occur and help it to occur. But we, the people, we can't keep waiting for a bright night. We have to be that bright night.
The solution is very simple, folks. We don't need any of the 677 federal courts. We don't need a single one of them. Every state has their own Supreme Court system. If there's a dispute between states, it can go to the Supreme Court. And if there's a dispute there, it can go to the Supreme Court. But let's remember, the Supreme Court docket is chosen by an assistant, not by the Supreme Court justices. And the decisions are usually written by assistants. And the people who come in and they say they have a whole beautiful conservative history, and then they get on the Supreme Court and they become extraordinarily liberal. You see the politics there? We need to have them elected by the people. They can't be appointed by politics. It's always going to be biased. It's always going to be partisan. So get rid of the federal courts. Pay the SES members, all of them, $1 a year. If they don't go away, they can hang out, but they don't have any more power. You're not going to. And what Trump did is, I think it was his third executive order, said, none of my cabinet have any power to make any decision whatsoever without my permission. That's the way we have to go. And then you have to say to Serco, sorry, you get $1 and you're no longer in charge. Then you have to say to the British, you have no access to our patent office. And then we say to the Serco and the British Crown agents, you don't get any contracts. None. Zero. Sorry, Lockheed Martin. Sorry, Urenco. Sorry, all of you who rip off America. These are the vampires. We have to simply get rid of the vampires in the anarchist jurisprudence system. These are anarchists.
And the other thing we need to do is turn off our satellites related to the war in Europe. The EU, Ukraine, and Russia, our satellites need to be turned off in those regions. That will ground all this electronic warfare that's going on. It's just a bunch of cowardly acts, and therefore that will quickly stop that war. But if we don't do it, it's just going to keep escalating.
It's a great suggestion. You know, Elon Musk gave them free Starlink service so that they could carry on the war early on. He was, and yes, without the technology, they can't. Those drones don't work. And look what the drones just did. Those drones, which are definitely not from Ukraine, I don't believe they're from America. So therefore they came from the Brits and the European Union, probably built in Dubai, because they were just beautifully, magically shipped there. And then all the people were all killed. So there was no witnesses.
Yeah.
I don't know what, as you say, I don't believe one word of anything I hear now from European Union or Britain, because their freedom of speech is so squelched. It's so stamped. Oh, it's so completely obliterated There is no free speech in major parts of the European Union. It's certainly not coming anything out of Ukraine in years and years and years. It's all been lies, triple lies within lies. And anything from Putin, he's just doing his defensive posturing. And, what he wants, he's always wanted. He wants all of Ukraine because it's the home of the Rus. It's the home of the Russians. So as we're looking at all this confusion going on, I do believe, just like you, that there is a way through. And the way through is very simple once you know who the enemy is.
Exactly.